My name is Todd Fernandez with Climate Crisis Policy, and I'll be your host today. Thank you all for joining us. We have a packed full meeting, so we're going to barrel through it. And looks like our numbers are a little low today compared to, we're normally in the 50s, 60s, but spring is springing, so this is probably to be expected. So I'm not too concerned about it, but we'll just have to keep reminding everyone. There's just so much going on, it's hard to keep track. So I'm just going to rattle off some of the initial things, and then I'll list the agenda, and then we're going to dive in to all the presentations that we have today. Last couple of weeks, we've had some great meetings with the NAACP and the Poor People's Campaign, who reached out to us actually after our last engagement, and Earth Rights. And so those conversations are going great and very exciting opportunities for collaboration. Poor People's Campaign is talking about the adopted district idea, and because they already organize in 45 states. So the prospects of collaboration there are obviously very excited. We've also been invited by U.S. Climate Action Network and Jim from Food and Water Watch to participate in a progressive bill package process that's being led by Saul Levin, who's now with Representative Cori Bush's office from Missouri, but used to work with Representative Holland in New Mexico. So that's very exciting. They'll be creating a bill package. So our bill package will hopefully make it in there, and then the bills we have in queue, hopefully as well. See how that goes, but it's exciting that they're doing it. Their goal is to get 100 co-sponsors for this package. Maybe Jim will touch on that a little bit later. I saw a movie called Seaspiracy, and while we're not tackling fishing in the oceans, it was a horrifying movie to watch. And the trolling of the seas is like clear cutting of the forest. And so this is a very serious piece of the puzzle that hopefully we'll be able to dig into later. Attell is bringing some ocean bills to our attention. It really seems to come down to a matter of being able to keep track of all these boats and where they are and what they're catching. And the thought occurred to me, I had 101 degree temperature from my COVID shot while I was watching that movie. It was probably not a good idea. And, but it occurred to me with facial recognition and Google satellite and location tracking services, we should be able to put live video cams on every boat out there and watch specifically what's coming up in those nets and have computers tell us who's doing the right thing. There's no excuse really for that supply chain being an invisible situation. The same is true for raising animals on land, by the way. We'll see about that. Earth Day initiative's coming up. They have a very cute thing set up with the virtual booth. And so like 80 groups are gonna have this. We're on this like little virtual playground, and you have a little emoji and you move around and you move up to somebody's booth and you can see their videos, see information, and talk to them. And Zoom windows pop up. So Emma from Fridays for the Future and Catherine from from Sierra Club, New York, and I are going to host the booth. And if anyone else wants to join us for that, you're very welcome. It's from noon to 7 on the 19th. The day before, on the 18th, they have a virtual stage that evidently is sort of like an all-day symposium with lots of speakers. I forget who's headlining that. The filibuster update quickly, those meetings are going great. It's run by the Hub Project and Fix Our Senate. And it was just so inspirational to be on that meeting on Friday to see all these groups coming together. And they mentioned the Equality Act. And that's as one of the main bills that they think is being blocked by the filibuster. And I spent over 6 years of my life getting that bill filed and basically torturing my own movement until they agreed to do it. And now to hear everybody talking about it and everybody supporting it brought tears to my eyes. But beyond that, the filibuster is very serious. They're thinking S1, for the people bill, which is the democracy, gerrymandering, all that, might come to a head in early May. So materials are in the email I sent out in the letter to Schumer. There's a lot of groups, Indivisible, Common Cause, lots of groups involved in that. So it's very exciting. You can join that coalition, it's in the email. The Faith Group is having its next meeting on May 5th, and we're looking for some singers to come in and do some inspirational singing. And also, if you know any frontline climate activists that are pastors or leads in their faith communities that are really preaching this stuff and walking the talk, we want to bring and showcase some of those really dedicated frontline folks to inspire others in that situation to also step up. The Earth Bill's on the agenda for today, but as you probably saw, liftoff email went out today with all sorts of information about it and pledges, links to the definitions, which we're going to go over today. The website is being designed, earthbill.org. We presented on this to a Canadian group, and they're talking about Earth Bill Canada. We're talking to people in England. It really seems to be resonating. We'll talk more about that later. On today's agenda, we have meeting report backs from a variety of folks who have been meeting with their Congress people. Our youth partners are here, and they're going to be saying hello and a little bit about our collaboration. We'll go into the Earth Bill definitions, and then we're going to have a movement and legislative update by Jim Walsh from Food and Water Watch. So real quickly, starting with the adopted district, you can tell I'm going fast because some folks have appointments and have to jump off of this meeting that are presenting, and we just have a lot to go over. So real quickly on adopted district, Greg can't be with us today, but you all know Greg Wagner, who's helping to lead that. He gave me some updated numbers. We have 130 activists involved in 94 congressional districts, 17 in Republican districts, and 77 in Democratic districts. Please adopt yours today. If somebody could put that link, I'll try to do it while I talk. Let's see if I can do this. And then adopted districts, folks, if you've already signed up for it, please, and you haven't checked in with Greg or heard from Greg, please reach out to him. He's carrying a lot of water, managing over 130 people and growing. So if you could please touch base with him and let us know that you're still active. And we'll talk a little bit more about action steps. But some people are already having meetings and are experts. Some people are new. If you need help, also in the email, we listed Selden's email, and she's available to help new folks and guide them along. So that's really going great. 94 districts. I'm very excited about that. But we want to get to 200 by the end of soon. We want to get to 200. So if you're already adopted district, if you could please look at the list and see which districts in your state are not adopted, and maybe go after one more district to find somebody there to adopt their district. That would double our numbers instantly. So, all right, without further ado, I'm going to invite Susan Cavalieri from the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network, who's worked with 350 also out there, met with Congressman Jimmy Panetta of California 20. Welcome, Susan. And if you could please give us a brief report back on your meeting.
Sure. Thank you very much, Todd. So 350 in Silicon Valley and the Santa Cruz Climate Action Network spoke with Congressman Jimmy Panetta. He is very much in favor of electric vehicles, electric bikes. I approached him about the 5 climate-related bills. He was not that supportive, I have to say. I was very upset. He said that that agriculture wasn't at the table, and that is why things did not go forward during the last session. I am writing him an email to point out to him that he had sponsored a bill in the last session, HR 4051, which was about a climate tax and or a carbon tax, and he wanted to provide money for farmers. In that bill, he wanted to pay farmers for reforestation, restoration of wetlands, use of crop covers, no-till, and so I just wanted to, and also decrease emissions from livestock and fertilizers. So I wanted to get back to him as to why he couldn't support these bills when he was advocating for these regenerative practices. So it's an ongoing dialogue, I would have to say.
Well, wonderful, Susan. And did you touch on the plastics, fracking,
He has
pollution
already
welfare?
endorsed the break free from plastic. He is also signed on to environmental justice for all. Fracking, we did not address, but we talked a lot about renewable energy.
All right. Well, wonderful.
California has a bill, a fracking bill coming up. So I'm hoping that we get somewhere with that.
All right. Wonderful. And thank you also, Susan, for all your work on the food ag sector. Wonderful. It's very exciting that all these meetings are happening. Next up, we have Ed. I know I was asked you if you wanted to say something about your meeting with Charlie Crist. Are you with us today? I didn't get the response if you could join us. It was very last minute.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, go ahead. Would you like to say a couple of words about that?
Sure. We had the meeting on the 23rd of August, or of March, and it went very well. We did manage to get the total script down to 20 minutes, our climate story, and then we did the 20-minute presentation and asked if there was any question. The only question that Sarah had really was what the bill 117 thing. I have not been able to find it. Anyway, if and when we get that, I will forward it to them. We also, we followed up by sending them the presentation and sending them one sheeter that we put together on each bill. And by the way, Charlie Crist already supports the plastic bill, so it's basically down to 8 bills with him. And she said she'd get back to us if she had any questions or any concerns, but so far we've heard nothing.
All right, wonderful. So we didn't get a firm answer on any particular bills?
No, other than he already co-sponsored the plastic bill.
What was their reaction to the fracking bill, given your presentation on the fracking issue in Florida?
Really, there wasn't. There was really nothing. I mean, she absorbed what we said, but like I said, she had no questions or anything. But by the way, if we can get other people in Florida, this presentation is perfect for any representative from Florida. We'd be happy to help work with them or even give the presentation for the district if we can just find some constituents to set up the meetings and stuff like that.
All right. Well, thank you. Wonderful, Ed. Appreciate it. And I know that your partners are working on a meeting with Castor, Representative Kathy Castor across the pond there. All right. Next up, we have Sarah Gronum from 350 Brooklyn, who led a tour de force meeting with Senator Gillibrand. And I think we have like 15 or 6. How many districts do we have adopted in New York, Sarah? And you all met with her.
We have 19 and 14 of the districts. My video got stopped by you guys, but you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
All right, start my video. Okay, here we go. All right, so yeah, we met with actually her senior advisor and another aide at the end of March.
A little louder, Sarah, if you could.
We met with her senior advisor and another assistant at the end of March. We had a half hour, very clear. So we wrote a script ahead of time, which I put in the chat. Anyone's welcome to use it or ignore it, depending on what you have. 14 of us were on the Zoom call, right? And I have a couple of observations just to make. The first was that clearly having a range of people in the room, each of whom articulated a different reason why they belong to climate crisis policy, was very impressive. And we had people from literally all over New York State on the call. And we are trying to do that in our district ones in two, when we go to a congressperson. Not necessarily somebody from Climate Crisis Policy, a group that belongs to Climate Crisis Policy, but one person brought someone from Oceana, for example. Oceana is a big supporter of the Break Free from Plastics. So he was incredible articulation on that bill. Another person brought a group of high school students along with her different environmental groups, so they could articulate why young people are so it means so much to young people. Another one has recruited a farmer, speaking of Susan's concerns, right? Who can speak very knowledgeably about regenerative agriculture. So I think the importance of having a variety of people in the room lends a legitimacy to this. A second is, we scripted it because we had half an hour, and we took a page from Ed's book because he had shared his PowerPoint with us a month ago, and we made a PowerPoint. But we also took his idea of clustering, right? Them together and not reading the PowerPoint, but speaking about the significance of them so that we could do something pretty tight, right? We also created a handout that we sent ahead of time and that she could use as a reference point. And the third point I want to make is that we don't go in thinking about there's an ask, because there isn't really an ask yet. What we say is that we expect these bills all to be reintroduced. We want them to remember Climate Crisis Policy's name and our reason for being here. And we will come back each and every bill. So I know that Environmental Justice for All was reintroduced in the mid-March, and Break Free from Plastics had a big launch on April 1st. But as far as we can find, there are no bill numbers yet, right? But when we're going into these offices, we're saying every time we get a bill number, we're going to be back, and then we're going to want our yes, no from you. So we expect to make many phone calls, many visits over the course of the next few months. And that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
That's wonderful. Sarah, just real quick, if you could give any advice to other people working on adopted district or trying to organize your state. We have about 4 or 5 states with state leads like Sarah. If we had Sarah in every state, we would be really unbelievable.
Well, you would have a very tired Sarah.
We need Sarah in every state. No, it's true. So any ideas or suggestions to lure people into the role you're playing in New York?
It's actually not that hard, in the sense that the people who tend to join this organization tend to already be pretty enthusiastic and willing to self-educate themselves. So it's not as if you're doing a lot of training or mentoring or that. You're just helping people along. One of the things we do is we have a monthly, regularly scheduled Zoom meeting, right? Another thing we do is that I do offer myself with a phone call to anyone who's new, and maybe half the people take that up. And I have a very good spreadsheet of all the people who volunteered, so that I, introduce them to each other. Just some straightforward organization and kindness goes a long way, but it's not so labor intensive in that way. Yeah.
That's a very important message when you're trying to lure somebody into a role, is that it's not too much work.
But it's also, you meet some really great people. The people we've got in New York State, as I'm sure are true all over, are just great. So, that's a lot of fun to meet those people.
That's wonderful. And I saw the email thread with the meeting that's happened with Representative Stefanik, and folks that are in Republican districts, don't despair. We know what you're up against, but you're frankly, even in the Democratic districts, you can hear, we're not getting yeses across the board on all this. Right. So, but we're going to come up with ways to support and reinforce you in particular over time. We'll be talking more about that. But don't despair. Just after you go to your meetings, come back out and find your people. grow your people. And that leads me just real quickly. I'll say thank you, Sarah, and we'll do more digging into how to organize at the statewide level. But we really were looking for folks to help with that. Ed was asking for somebody in Florida. So you know the idea, if you're in a state, and we'll get you in touch with Sarah or other people in Oregon who are doing this to guide you a little bit, so you won't be alone, but we really would love that help. So if you're in adopted district, the next 3 steps you can do is find groups, 5 groups or activists, and then places of worship in your community. Identify those 5 and write and call them and engage them to sort of bring in and build out your team. Then you could send the email for the climate bill package, of course. Anyone can send that. You don't even have to adopt your district to do that. And now there's an email and a whole proposal for the Earth bill that's ready to go out as well. All that was in the email that went out today. And of course, the goal here is to set up legislator meetings, but I would also add to set up community meetings with those folks that you're going to reach out to. This is really the capacity building phase that we're in. And then again, Selden Prentice, she's offered to help with new folks, and that email went out as well, and she put it in the chat I just saw. All right, we're ahead of schedule. I can't believe it. This is good. We can always take time at the end to answer any questions if we get through everything. And I'll stay on the call anyway for our normal after meeting Q&A so we can answer anything. Next up, we're going to dive into our partners, our youth partners, and our direct action partners. And let's see, we're okay on time, I think. If we're going to, I know Harriet has a call, so she has to jump off too. But let's go ahead and start with Anna from Fridays for the Future. Anna and her team, Emma, and several others have been extremely hard at work. They've created their own adopted district program. And we want to just invite everyone here, and we'll send out more on this to invite the young people in your families, in your communities to join Fridays for the Future. Christine, if you can pull Anna up, did you find her? And to join Fridays for the Future, and then also to adopt their congressional district working with the youth. And I'll let Anna take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Todd. Yeah, I was about to say the same thing that you just said. Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a sophomore in high school. I'm also one of the directors of Fridays for Future New York City. And it's really great to be here with everyone and working with you guys. This is really, really exciting. So yeah, over the past couple months, we've been working on just sort of creating a parallel adopted district program for youth that's working basically in the same way the adult adopted district program is working. And so far we have, I think, about 10 districts adopted with about 20 people involved, and we're looking to really expand and get more outreach, because this would be a really powerful way to reach more people, and because youth have such a strong voice, it'll be a great way to really advocate for the Earth Bill. So I'm going to put a couple links in the chat. Just give me 1 second. But if all of you could spread the word, send this to any youth that you know, any youth that you think would be interested. They can be college, in high school, in middle school. Anyone is welcome. We're just looking, no one has to have experience. The links are in the chat now. And you can feel free to reach out with any questions if you have any, but we're really just looking for more youth who are passionate about this and want to learn how to lobby and lead. Yeah.
Wonderful. There are no words to how impressed I am with Anna's organizing and the whole team. And it gives me hope for the future. But as we know, this is on us as adults to fix this. And it's wonderful that we're working together, but we really need to carry the water on this, so to speak. But anyway, it's very exciting that we're collaborating. And Anna, did we decide if we're going to mention anything about the DA organizing?
That's up to you. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but only if you think it's a good idea.
Go ahead. And I think Christina's here with us too, but go ahead and mention it. And it's preliminary, but it's in motion. Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we've also been working with Todd and Christina from Extinction Rebellion to sort of put together a direct action group organizing program. We're going to be working on some big actions over the summer. The first one, which will hopefully be on July 2nd. And we're going to be working on getting groups across the country to mobilize in their own cities and towns and make a big splash on July 2nd to really push in front of congressional offices for the Earth Bill. And Todd, you can add more details if you have any.
That's all we have for now, but thank you for giving the glimpse of the coming attractions. All right, so thank you again, Anna, for everything, and Emma and the whole team. And next up, we have, if we have them with us, Anna Johns and Sarah Babcock from Youth for Nature. Youth for Nature is more college to 30-year-old bracket range of individuals. Not sure if they made it to the call, or either one of you on it?
I don't think they're here, Todd.
Oh, okay. Well, that's no problem. So we'll come back to that, but we've had a wonderful meeting with them and they're extremely excited about it all. And we'll invite them back to present and say hello next time. Next up, we're going to have Harry Sugarman from Climate Mama, and she's going to talk about the intergenerational organizing that sort of relates to all of this. So Harriet, welcome. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Todd. And it's so good to see everybody again and to get back involved here. A few things I want to share that are happening in parallel with the youth movement. The parents and grandparents groups are trying to be better coordinated here in the US, but also globally. We have two sort of arms of that. They're coalitions, one called Our Kids Climate, which has one of the leads here in Brooklyn, and then two in England, and another Fridays for Future Global, which is in Europe. And there are many other groups of parents spread out. So we're trying to bring parents together, grandparents, caregivers, families under this umbrella hashtag Our Kids Climate that we launched for Mother's Day in the UK. If you look at it, you'll see some really incredible, I mean, this is just one of many things, but I think there's a tie-in for the Earth Bill potentially coming up with that. That's why I'm talking about that one. We brought in illustrators, and it was to just how do we represent our planet Earth, and leading into the COP, and we're going to have probably some kind of art display depending how the COP plays out, but asking for demands. And there were certain ones in the UK tied to that. Mother's Day in May is celebrated in over 60 countries, and Father's Day in June also in many countries. I think we should be starting to use the hashtag Earth Bill in a much bigger way. It isn't used actually on Instagram or Twitter. Bringing into social media the idea of what this Earth Bill will be as it's become, more clearly defined. We are meeting on Tuesday for a coordinating group for the Our Other Mother campaign in the US, and I'm going to propose that we tie the hashtag also to the Earth Bill, and then there'd be a connection there. I want to tell you also about something I'm just watching. I want to get more involved with it, but there's another group called Beyond Extreme Energy that many of you may know about, doing amazing things in relation to FERC. And a number of the organizers of that group have, in 2013, did a walk for our grandchildren. There was 100 people walking to DC. They are in the works of weekly meetings of planning a walk maybe on Father's Day, but in June, from Scranton, so from the birthplace of Biden to Wilmington, to the where he lives. And it would be, good to potentially tie in again in terms of the timing, the July 2nd action, and the Earth Bill into that process as well. And so that's just happening. So those are some things in the parent space that are that maybe we could, tie in promotion, outreach, just get people to know more about what the Earth Bill is, and just hold on to it. So Todd asked me just to share that. There's lots more things percolating and a lot of more organizing that's finally, having worked in this space for more than 10 years, that really is actually coming together now. So I'm excited about that, and excited for us to tie it in with the Earth Bill as well. Thank you. And I'm going to have to jump off in about 10 minutes. I apologize for that.
No worries. This is all wonderful. Harriet, hold up your book though before you go. Hold up your book. Harriet's book. She's talking to Good Morning America. It's on how to talk to your kids about climate change. It's getting all sorts of recognition. Bravo. And Harriet was kind enough to invite me to a event with Canadian organizers, and they're excited about Earth Bill Canada, it sounds like. It's hard to believe. So wonderful. Well, Harriet, it's a pleasure. And then Anna, maybe we could get Harriet to join one of our calls so that we can really dig into this collaboration aspect of it. I forget when our next call is, but I'll circle back with you on all that. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. All right. Next is Christine C. with us from Extinction Rebellion. Christine, did you make? Oh, yay. Hello.
Hi.
I know you're busy, but welcome. This is Christina C. with Extinction Rebellion. Please welcome, and you have the stage.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. So as Anna mentioned, we've been working on getting a plan together for July 2nd. And that would kind of be similar to Adopt a District, but with action groups around the country. And we'll be putting together a digital toolkit, which will have all of the information. So I know some people still aren't too interested in going on the streets due to COVID. So there'll be a way for people to engage with it online. And if anyone's seen kind of the things that have been happening in the last few months around digital actions and toolkits, that's kind of the idea. We'll also, be giving out messaging where people can kind of use that as a starting point and go from there, and kind of tailor it if they need to their location or their congressperson. Yeah, so if anyone is interested or has contacts with direct action groups around the country, I will put my email in the chat and you can get in touch with me.
Wonderful. This is very exciting. So we've also set up, put on the calendar 2 nationwide direct action organizing phone calls. I forget when they are. What are the dates again? May 1st? No, I shouldn't say until we know. So if anyone could look at their calendar, it was a Saturday and a Wednesday coming up in May. And between now and then, we'll have materials from Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion will be doing their own sort of pitches. And there are the dates, May 1st and May 5th. And we're going to send out a form for if you know any direct action groups in your community to get the form to them so they can fill that out as we create a nationwide list of direct action groups. So that'll be coming soon. So just please think about that. Ask around who are the direct action groups in your communities, and we'll take it from there. The idea is to sort of parallel, as Christina has just said, the Adopt a District program, but with direct action groups. I think this is the big piece of the puzzle that's missing in the climate movement, coordinated direct action linked across the country. So this is very exciting. I'm so excited. I'm so glad you're here, Christina. Thank you. I know you're busy at work and in grad school. And so anyway, it's wonderful. We're excited. All right, thank you. Let's see what's next on the schedule. We're doing great on time, I think. 12:36. Oh yes, we're ahead of schedule, which has me very happy. So next we're going to talk about the Earth Bill and updates. So let me see if I can get my head back on my shoulders about this, because I have to say it. Well, since our last meeting, we zeroed in on 3 pieces of this puzzle: electricity, vehicles, and food, or electricity, cars, and food. And the 3 of them combined could be 80% of the solution to our pollution, or the pollution solution, as I'm now calling it. And they are also consumer elements, right? It's our electricity, it's our vehicles, it's our food production. Those companies work for us. It's our consumption, it's our pollution, and it's our opportunity to make really significant change. And in addition, it's 100% of the political problem. And this is very important, because when you're trying to find a movement demand, it has to be understandable. Bringing it down to 3 elements, electricity, cars, and food, makes it, I think, more accessible, more understandable. You want to have real greenhouse gas reductions, which this does, in addition to the carbon sequestration of going regenerative agriculture. And you need the demand that can break the political opposition. And these three arenas, and going 100% renewable energy, electric vehicles, and regenerative agriculture with large agricultural companies, those three demands are the nightmare of those industries. They're the last thing they want. They're the last thing to be included in the agenda. They're not involved in included in the international discussions about national contributions, and they're not involved domestically in any of the proposed legislation. And that's a shame, because the carbon clock, as you know, has us with less than 7 years before our pollution locks in 1.5. And as I've said before, between 1.5 and 2, the tipping points ensue, and those are what are truly terrifying. Ocean currents stopping flowing, which is hard to articulate, believe it or not, and ice sheets melting completely. So these are terrifying ideas that require us to go faster and to put a 2030 deadline in play. As I said before, this corresponds to a lot of demands across the various coalitions, very similar type of deadlines. And so I think we've come up with the right idea. I just can't believe it. It was staring us in the face all the time. Real quickly, we're going to go into the definitions a little bit. We have a website being designed for this, earthbill.org. If anyone knows any logo makers, it would be fun to have those, and we can have multiple logos. So we could have a little assortment of logos. In terms of process, the policy sector teams worked on definitions very diligently and very quickly, and I might have to apologize to a few folks for pushing that so quickly. But we reached great agreement, and the energy folks with renewable energy, we wanted to work with the definition of the OFF Act, but then Jim, who's here with us today, informed me that that was not a great idea because it included some elements of energy efficiency, and we really wanted to focus purely on the generation. And so I'm going to go over that definition. Catherine Skopic was going to, but she's in another meeting with the Sierra Club. I put this in the document, but I'll just put it here again in the chat. The definition we zeroed in on is, there it is, renewable electricity means energy produced from wind, solar, geothermal, tidal, wave, and existing hydropower sources. We included existing hydropower sources because of the Northwest, which is heavily dependent upon it. And so it's sort of grandfathering existing sources, but not in allowing for additional ones. I think that really nails it, frankly. It's as tight as I think it can get, really. With that, and the document in the email that I sent out, and you can comment in the document there about these things. And the definitions are not fixed in any firm way, although we really needed to have parameters to be able to pitch it. So until a bill gets filed, they're not really even solid, that solid. And even after a bill gets filed, we know that we're just staking out a position for the movement that we think will inspire us. And it is the vision. It is the clean vision. And so I always say you have to start with your vision and let the other side negotiate and let the politicians compromise. But we don't have to do any of that because we need to be inspired. Next up, we're going to have Emily Miller from Family Farm Action Alliance. If Emily's with us. Oh, hi, Emily's with us. And
Hello.
Hi, Emily, welcome. And Emily's going to walk us through the definitions on regenerative agriculture and industrial ag food corporations. Welcome,
Yeah.
Emily. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Todd. And thanks for putting together such an amazing coalition and jam-packed agenda. And just thank you for organizing us and all of your work, and Christine and everyone on this call. But yeah, I'll quickly kind of share just kind of an overview of the food and ag sector team, how we got to the certain definitions and approach that we did, and then quickly go through the definitions. So a thing to understand before I really get into the definitions is that in the agri-food sector, largely large agribusiness corporations are the ones controlling the structure and the practices, and then the climate harming things that come from agriculture. and not the individual farmers. So you'll notice in these definitions, we're not mandating individual farmers to do anything. We're in fact mandating these large agribusiness corporations. So because many farmers implement some of these practices that are harmful simply because it's the only way that they can financially stay afloat. So we want to change it from the top down. So with that, oh, thanks Todd for putting that stuff in the chat. First, we'll go through the definition of these industrial plant and animal corporations. I'll use terms like agribusiness corporation, but that's all the same. So the definition is an entity, domestic or foreign, owned, that is engaged in agricultural or food sectors in the United States that A, require farm or ranch operators to purchase patented or entity-owned inputs for crops, livestock, or animal products, ultimately acquired by the entity or subsidiary thereof. So that's like a long-winded way of saying if a farmer enters a contract with an agribusiness corporation, that corporation then dictates what inputs they use. So like what seeds, what feed they feed their animals, what certain practices they have to do in order to then sell that end product back to the corporation or back to another corporation that's in a relationship or is a subsidiary of the original one. And if none of this is clear, please do reach out to me. I'm happy to try and walk this through. So that's like the first big catch-all. The second thing is an entity. So we have the or. So if they don't do that, or we can't prove they do that, if they then require particular on-farm management practices in their contracts, they'll fall into this category. C, if they control 15% or greater of any agricultural food sector, meaning they have a large amount of market power to price fix and that sort of thing. And then D, if they're publicly traded on the Securities Exchange Commission, that might end up being taken out simply because it's a very large category, or we might tighten that up a bit. So that's like the definition of what a large agribusiness is. So in the Earth Bill, we would then mandate that those agribusinesses implement what are known as these regenerative practices. So it's that second definition that Todd put in. So the term regenerative agriculture means any of those following practices. I won't read them all aloud because there's many of them, but this definition comes from the Climate Stewardship Act. It's the direct text. And it's supported by Senator Booker and now Secretary Holland. So it's already made the rounds of Congress and will be introduced again. But basically, all of these practices are more or less proven to be climate friendly, to sequester carbon. You'll notice that CAFOs are not included in this definition. So their absence from this definition means that they are not allowed. If anyone needs some clarity on that. Yeah, I see the hands. And then, oh, Todd just had more. The definition got too long, but those are the main definitions we're working with. And right now we're guessing that this would directly impact about 243 million acres of agricultural farmland, which is big. And then it will indirectly impact more acres as, you know, animal raising practices change, crop patterns change, and that sort of thing. So it's really far reaching and sweeping. I think that's all from me, Todd. I know that was a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions.
It's wonderful. And thank you so much, Emily. This was an interesting challenge for us to figure out how to capture the big ag companies. But I think we got there thanks to Emily. And I guess you asked some of your team, I'm not sure, but we started with writing it in and then we got this to where we are. And I think it's pretty solid. We'll be passing it over to some lawyers at Earth Rights to help us make sure that we've trapped them. And so it's really sort of, I mean, Emily, this is, it's been staring us in the face a little bit all this time, right? We wanted everybody to go to regenerative agriculture, but the idea of mandating that the big ag corporations make that transition, that's sort of the new piece of this puzzle. Any reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing. The more agricultural practices that are climate friendly and regenerative, the better. I think for a long time in this organizing space, and still trying to get individuals to implement these practices, which is great, but unfortunately, just with the way that the agriculture sector and markets are currently formed, it's just really not financially feasible. So farmers have to walk this line of, well, do I grow my crops in a way that I know isn't environmentally sound, or do I lose my farm entirely? And I think our approach sidestep, like farmers don't have to make that decision. And so I think it's a step in the right direction for sure.
Wonderful. Well, I think it's extremely exciting. And the idea that it puts big ag, all the pharmaceutical companies, and big oil for the other provisions, all in the crosshairs, and to mandate a change in their polluting practices that are destroying the soil. The most alarming information I saw was 60 years of harvests, 60 more harvests before they think the soil is going to be depleted worldwide, which in and of itself could be a source of famine. That's without climate crisis destroying things. So that's just obviously unacceptable. And then the other fabulous number I found in researching with this was like that regenerative farming is 78% more profitable.
Yep.
Because the cost of the inputs go way down and everything just gets better. So there's really no reason to stop this except for the greed of a handful of corporations.
Yeah, and that, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Obviously, we know that these large corporations are kind of like squashing these practices because they know that if farmers had access and autonomy to use these regenerative practices, then the corporations wouldn't be making their profits, right? So the other side of this is, yes, we mandate these agribusiness corporations to do all of this, but then their control becomes, it's no longer a factor that farmers have to deal with. So.
Yes, and so this is extremely important, and the benefits from this are tremendous. The ability of the soil to absorb water, so when increased rains come, we don't have floods, to resist drought, to produce obviously healthier and more nutritious food, to keep the soil alive into the future. So these are not co-benefits, these are fundamental benefits. And we have then increased carbon sequestration potential. And I know there's a little discussion around the capability there, but everyone knows it will be higher. It will be greater if we have living organic soil that hasn't been killed with fertilizers and plowed over and turned to dust. All right, well, Emily, it's a pleasure as always. So grateful. We wouldn't have gotten there without you and our food and ag team. All of you, thank you so much. You've been really wonderful coming to the meetings, and it's been a great group to work with. All right, so on that, if you're ready to take the Earth Bill pledge, I put it in there today. You guys are already on our list. You don't need to take it again, but if you want to, go ahead. And we have the pledge for organizations. And this is very important because we want to put logos on the website, on the new website. So this is important for all of you. If you could please look at the email I sent, it might be in your spam, might be elsewhere. It says Liftoff, the Earth Bill, a 2030 moonshot for Earth. If you could find that email in your inboxes and then share it with your organizations and see if we can get early endorsements for this idea. And we're going to put the logos in order in which they come in. So whoever wants to be first on the list, please get in there first. And this is it. And then we have, of course, the federal elected officials pledge. I'm putting it in the chat, federal elected officials. And So it's time to go ahead and ask them. And in the email I sent out with all of this, there's an email drafted specifically to them. So you can combine this with your climate bill package asks. And this new email emphasizes the Earth bill, but it also references the climate bill package. So you can use that. And just feel free to send it out and start emailing your congressperson. You don't have to adopt anything. Let's just get this conversation in motion, because in theory, these three standards could fit in the infrastructure bill. They could fit in because they have their, oh, I forgot to mention, of course, the hook. They're tied to the taking of general business deductions is the approach. And that means, you know, if they don't meet the goals, it would reduce their taking of their ordinary business deductions, which are the deductions they take for their rent and their salaries and all their expenses of doing business. I think reducing those would be a strong incentive. That's not until year 10, so they have plenty of time, right? Or 2030, which I guess is not 10 years anymore, but you get the idea. So please forge ahead with it, and we'll keep, you know, looking at the definitions together, and we'll have another conversation about that at our next meeting. And if you're really interested in those definitions, please join those policy sector meetings, and we can talk more in depth about them. I can't believe we're running ahead of schedule, but I know Jim was here already. So we're just going to go ahead and go right into it.
Todd, excuse me. Did you want to do the poll?
Oh, I forgot. Yes, let's put the poll up. Here's a poll. I forgot what we put in it already. So the Earth Bill now is focused on three things: electricity, cars, and food. We took out steel and cement because we ended up in a rabbit's hole of discussion about what percentage of greenhouse gas emissions come from that. There's also an element of those things that are like the electricity you use. So renewable electricity should help with that. And we just thought this was a cleaner focus for, you know, the masses. Three things that are consumer focused. You know, 3 is a magic number, seems like. So do you support the focus on electricity, cars, and food? Do you support the definition of clean energy? You haven't had time, you don't have to decide right now. Same with regenerative. The 2030 deadline, asking about that. About the sense of urgency, are we warranted? I know we're going to sound crazy going in there with this 2030 deadline, but mass extinction sounds crazy too. And so does the ocean current stopping to flow, which then disrupts everything. This is why they talk about mass extinction, because of those kinds of things. And then the last, will you email your senator on this? And feel free to answer those. And we'll be gearing up to invite Jim Walsh from Food and Water Watch, my conscience, and always holding the firm ground on the right side of every argument, I believe. And I don't give that kind of ringing endorsement to many people, but Jim holds that space. And I'm grateful that he's still with us. Left side, he said. So anyway, Jim, welcome. He's going to tell us everything that's wrong with all the bills that are being pushed and all the razzle dazzle, smoke and mirrors that we're seeing, and you know, get us excited about some of the key demands, I think, about the tax subsidies that they have squarely in their sights. That is part of our package, the Pollution Welfare Act. Jim, welcome back. It's good to see you again, and please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much, Todd. And thank you, everybody, for participating in efforts to engage policymakers in the, you know, the decisions that they're making. It's very important we communicate with them and meet with them, and also communicate with them and organize on these issues between those meetings as well. And I am going to talk about, and it's interesting actually, because you know, some of the things that people are running into their meetings are some of the things that I'm also seeing in other meetings that we're having on the Hill with other offices. And so one of the things I wanted to do, and oh, you know, Todd, I'm trying to share a screen, but it's disabled. I don't have to share slides. That's okay.
Let's do it. Christine, go ahead and make Jim co-host, please. I'm hearing that there's a button on the, oh, when you hit the submit button on the poll, you have to scroll all the way down and make sure you answer all the questions. Sorry about that, Jim.
That's okay. All is well. Now let me see if I can get this in shared. All right, can folks see this?
Yes.
All right, great. And so I'm going to talk about some of the, buzzwords and things that I've heard and some of the things happening in Congress. I'm going to talk about some of the actual opportunities that we have right now to really make some big changes in our climate and energy system. And some of the major pieces of legislation that are in play right now and are being discussed in DC. And so the first thing I want to do is just highlight for folks that these issues here that are I highlight here are really some of the predominant narratives that are being pushed by the oil and gas industry and their allies in Congress. And it's the idea that carbon capture and negative emissions technologies are necessary and important. The idea that we can just price carbon and that will make everything better for us. We don't need regulations on carbon. The setting up of a national offset and cap and trade system that would mirror the failing regional greenhouse gas initiative and the California cap and trade program that has a litany of problems and impacts on environmental justice communities and are really shown to be ineffective. The development of bioenergy, biofuels, biogas, and also the idea of a hydrogen economy, and which we need to be very careful of. And and we can talk, any of these can be explored more, but hydrogen is just something that is really dramatically being pushed by the oil and gas industry pretty aggressively. And right now, 95% of the hydrogen in the United States comes from fracked gas. And so when we're talking about building out green hydrogen, which is another buzzword, which I'll go into here in the buzzwords, is that the idea that we're going to have a green hydrogen economy is something we need to be very careful about. We need to really think about the scale and scope of hydrogen development. Some of the buzzwords that are being discussed, I want to flag for people, the idea of net zero. Net zero means that we will continue to have emission sources of carbon in the atmosphere, but it also ignores all of the externalities relating to fossil fuel development, right? So when we're talking about net zero carbon emissions, we're not talking about the air and water pollution that comes from the fracking, the emissions from factories and refineries and things like that that are impacting environmental justice communities. That ignores those. Clean energy standards is a new buzzword that has really come forward, to, which sounds great, but what it means is an emission-based standard, very similar to net zero and the idea of a carbon neutral or zero emission standard, which in the same way doesn't address the larger issues and also is very technology neutral. It's a way to very carefully for policymakers to craft a response that says we will continue to support fossil fuels, we'll continue to support nuclear, we'll continue to support unsustainable agricultural practices, and look at them as a net zero solution rather than being deliberate in the types of energy system that we want to use. Some people are saying, oh, well, polluters need to pay. And well, polluters do need to pay, but that also leads us to a point where we're talking about carbon pricing instead of actually addressing the real sources of emissions that are causing problems at the root source, which is the fossil fuel development. Forest and farm offsets is another buzzword that's being used a lot, which is very problematic when we're talking about how do we address the climate crisis and we're looking at farm and forest offsets. These offsets essentially allow polluters to buy credits from the forest industry and farmers instead of reducing their own emissions. But those credits are also contrary to actually creating a sustainable food system. And when I'm done speaking, I'll actually share a link to a letter that we're circulating. We're going to be delivering to Congress next week, opposing forest and farm offsets. Another word that's thrown around a lot is the idea of innovation. Whenever anybody on Capitol Hill or in the policy world says innovation, we need to be very leery of that. What innovation typically means is tweaking our existing infrastructure, not actually shifting to clean energy. Green hydrogen, which I touched on earlier, and then the nationally determined contribution. This is something that's starting to be talked about now, and it's in light of the Paris Climate Agreement, and every country has to come up with their nationally determined contribution. And so one of the things that when we look at this, nationally determined contribution, we need to look at the fair share that the United States is contributing to this. And really it goes beyond our own emissions reductions, but the resources, since the United States has been such a large historic emitter of greenhouse gases, our emission reductions need to go below the net zero framework. And that shouldn't be done through these ideas of negative emission technologies that don't actually exist, but they should be done through supporting the clean energy development in developing countries and countries in the global south who need the resources to do that, to help them reduce their emissions to make up for our own emission excesses that have gone on. Now, when I think about climate policy and things we need to do, these are the quick list of things that I really look at and what we need. Phasing out and ending fossil fuels and factory farms, banning fracking, getting rid of single-use plastics and refineries associated with that, ending fossil fuel subsidies and exports is key to this. When we talk about transitioning our energy system, we're not talking about any of the exports that are happening. We're not talking about the plastics industry, which is responsible for tremendous amounts of emissions, as well as all of the pollution that's poisoning our air and water. And we need to think big. The numbers being thrown around right now are far smaller than what we actually need to do. During Senator Sanders' campaign, he put together a package with $16 trillion in investments that was filled with pay-fors, mostly through the elimination of fossil fuel subsidies and corporate tax changes in the corporate tax code to make this transition able to be done. Now, where things are federally, we have somebody in the White House who actually believes in climate change is a problem that needs to be addressed. We have a closely divided Congress. We have a budget reconciliation process that's moving forward right now, where we can actually pass things without having to deal with the filibuster, which requires a 60-vote majority and provides some opportunities. The appropriations process, which will be happening in tandem and kind of maybe a little later in the year, where we talk about how we spend actual resources that are authorized by Congress, and then the regular order. And in the regular order, we're primarily just, bills go to committees and they move forward and they need all the votes to get through, which is a separate process from reconciliation. And so, the president is really taken a strong line on fossil fuel subsidies. And I see this as being a significant opportunity for us in the budget reconciliation process to actually eliminate fossil fuel subsidies and apply those resources to a just transition to clean, renewable energy. And with the closely divided House, this gives us an opportunity to move things, but it also creates an opportunity to be able to stop some of the bad things I talked about from moving forward. And so one of the things that's important to consider is a small block of people can stop things one way or the other from moving forward. Senator Manchin gets a lot of credit for being the deal maker. Who's going to determine all of these things. But the reality is there's a large number of representatives of the House that are bringing together a package of bills that will help to really draw the line for the policies we need to do this, and strengthening, empowering that group and expanding that group of legislators in the House and building that group in the Senate will be critical to actually making sure that these policies do move forward in reconciliation. I want to talk about some of the policies that are getting some attention and support right now in Congress, and that we need to be concerned about. And then also I'll talk a little bit about the Progressive Climate Bill package. The Growing Climate Solutions Act is a policy that will essentially lay the framework for a national cap and trade program. And this has USDA certified carbon offsets. And offsets have a litany of problems. They don't actually reduce emissions in these offset programs, and actually due to issues relating to impermanence of credits. So if you have a forest that becomes a carbon credit, that forest burns down, well, those carbon credits are now worthless, right? But they were already used to allow somebody else to pollute. It also has to do with the idea of additionality. Like, would that forest or would those farmers have embarked in those practices absent these sorts of offsets? And in many instances, they would have done some of these things anyways. And so they're really not effective tools for reducing emissions. And if you consider additionality or the issue of impermanence, you actually can be increasing emissions with these cap and trade and offset programs. They also have been shown to increase pollution in environmental justice communities. And this is really important because what happens is these large polluters, instead of reducing their emissions, actually wind up buying credits to allow them to continue polluting. And we've seen through analysis in California and the Northeast that the emissions in environmental justice communities have actually increased under the cap and trade programs, utilizing offsets in those areas. The Clean Future Act, this is a policy that's being pushed by Congressman Pallone, of the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. He's a very powerful and influential legislator. This policy focuses on some of the buzzwords, the net zero. It's technology neutral, which is really another buzzword that's used. And it means that we're not going to focus on clean energy. We're going to let the market figure it out. It relies on offsets to get to where we need to be. It promotes carbon capture and utilization, which is a boondoggle that has not been shown to work at scale, and is also now being used by companies like Occidental Petroleum to justify new types of plastics manufacturing that they're going to do through captured carbon. And much of the carbon right now that we're capturing at smokestacks has actually been is actually being used to support oil and gas drilling. So when we're supporting carbon capture storage with our tax dollars, what we're doing is subsidizing oil and gas drilling right now. And actually more oil drilling than gas, but there's a 2030 zero emission building standard. And so that zero emission language should be, should give us pause, but then also the idea that we have to wait until 2030 for new buildings to be built in a way that's sustainable. We can stop having emitting buildings today by stopping allowing these buildings to include gas infrastructure, right? We should be putting electric heating in buildings and electric hot water heaters and things like that, and electric stoves and ovens. And really, it's this idea that we just need to count carbon atoms and not generation. There is some resources for transportation in there and electrification of transportation, which is good and we should see happen. But there's a large focus in DC in general on individual vehicles, and there needs to be more focus on public transit, expanding access to public transit, expanding efficacy of public transit and things like that. The American Jobs and Energy Manufacturing Act is this policy that's been put forward by Manchin in the Senate, which really could be a very good piece of legislation. It proposes to invest $8 billion in manufacturing tax credits. Now, I'm not a big fan of tax credits, but the idea of investing in communities, and particularly coal communities, and those have been active in, who have been historically burdened by the fossil fuel industry, is appealing. But the idea that these resources could actually go towards these new types of plastic manufacturing from CO2, that this could go to supporting carbon capture technology and other sorts of dirty energy technologies that are really masquerading as clean, is very concerning. And so there should be significant changes to that bill before it gets included in the reconciliation package. And President Biden has put forward his American Jobs Plan, which does have the net zero and carbon-free electricity standard in there, which you should be very concerned about. One of the things with carbon-free electricity can actually, and I know there's some discussion of this in the chat, but carbon-free can mean nuclear. And it can also potentially mean offsets that are talked about and included in the plan to support agricultural offsets, like I talked about later. It does call for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, which is very important. It provides $2 trillion in public investment, which is significant, but it is far short of what we actually need in a long-term climate and energy program for the United States. And that is all. I tried to keep that under 10 minutes. I hope I came close.
That was wonderful, Jem. Thank you. Wow, that's wonderful. So, as you can see, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. That's why it's just so complicated. That's why we want to make it simple. Clean energy, renewable electricity, rather, clearly defined. Regenerative agriculture, clearly defined by the practices. And, stop the emissions from these big industries, these key industries. So this is the political showdown. No one's going to want to have that fight. they're not looking for any fights. When you spend money and throw money in every direction, nobody's going to be upset about that, right? This is a political strategy. It's very savvy. So I'm not sure where we should go from here. We're a little bit early. Jim, do you have any thoughts about just on that level about the reluctance of anyone to really put even calculating emission reductions or even saying what they're spending in tax credit ideas? I was in government a long time and oversaw lots of incentive programs. You don't know when businesses are going to take those incentives. You just don't know the timeline in which they will be used and what the impact will be. And more importantly, government spending cannot stop private sector pollution sources. And so we need these mandates. Nobody likes the word mandates, but they don't have a problem with mass extinction. So I'm like dumbfounded by that. We need these requirements, these standards in law, which then would unleash all sorts of private sector building for the renewable energy, building out the capacity and transforming the farmlands. So, do you agree that there's just no appetite for that real conversation? And what do we do about that?
So there is an appetite for that conversation, right? And there are members who support the types of policies that we need to see, and we're working with those members and working to move those things forward. But there are some, really entrenched interest in the fossil fuel industry who have been, for the last century, entrenching themselves in our systems of government. And so I think that, how do we overcome that? It's about building power, right? It's about the work that you all are doing to build power in congressional districts and to make sure that politicians know people in their communities care about this and prioritize this and see through the industry smokescreen, right? Like I see somebody up here asking about the citizen climate lobby bill, right? And so, I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's heard me talk before. I hate carbon taxes. I think they're awful. I think they're a huge mistake and a waste of progressive energy to talk about how to do that. The reason the oil and gas industry is supporting it is because it means that they will continue to exist in perpetuity under these models. These carbon taxes very wrongly focus on a system that makes our energy system more expensive, when we actually have the ability to bring clean energy online right now for less than the cost of staying on fossil fuels. And so, the reason that we're not making this transition isn't because fossil fuels aren't more expensive, right? The reason that we're not making this transition is because there's significant barriers that need to be overcome, and some of that can be overcome with federal support and resources, and then also combined with policies to actually make sure that we're keeping fossil fuels in the ground and transitioning to clean energy. And somebody asked about the Thrive Agenda. The Thrive Agenda does a really good job of addressing issues of Indigenous sovereignty. It has some really good provisions about just transition and environmental justice, but it lacks any real restriction on fossil fuel development. And so that's one of the things that the Thrive Agenda doesn't have on the table is the actual, what are we going to do about fossil fuels? It takes this kind of technology neutral approach to our clean energy standard. But as a bill would deal with Indigenous sovereignty and environmental justice, there's a lot to look at there that's really positive. But when we're talking about a comprehensive plan for addressing the climate crisis, we need to talk about plans that are going to keep fossil fuels in the ground.
And Jim, can you just also touch on the progressive climate bill package? I'm just so excited to hear the word climate bill package and progressive. And thank you for inviting me to that. And USCAN invited me, and I'm looped in now. But if you could just share with everyone that thinking.
Yeah, so, we're in the process of working with, I guess there's probably about 20 congressional offices that are involved in this, and a bunch of lobbyists like myself, and who are working to put together this package of legislation and that would really kind of look comprehensively at what we need to do. And so that's, going through the process. I think we're going to be rolling that out soon. But it's, I think that when I look at the policies that we need to have, and when I look at that bill, or I look at the other things, I'm constantly thinking about, how does this help electrify our economy? How does this keep fossil fuels in the ground? How does these policies end our use of single-use plastics and the expansion of refineries and other infrastructure? And so those are the, kind of things that the screen I'm looking for when I'm, putting thoughts in these bills that we're putting into this package and bringing it together.
Wonderful. Well, it's very exciting to see that kind of coordination, collaboration happening. This is one of our threads of organizing, is to try to bring pieces of legislation and constituencies together for greater political power and influence. And that's, I think, the same model playing itself out inside Congress, which is wonderful, and outside, of course. I think that's everything from Jim. If anyone, was there anything left in the chat that you didn't get to address?
I stopped looking at chat, but I don't know. Is there anything in there? I'm glad people are getting hope.
Selden was asking if you would take a question or two. She has a question she would like to ask.
Sure, go ahead, Selden.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I follow your work and I agree with everything you're saying. I just have a question about the CES, the Clean Energy Standard, because that's so prevalent in a lot of what we're seeing in Congress right now. If the CES were defined differently, would you still have a concern with that? If it was defined narrowly to include the energy sources that you like, as opposed to the concerns you've mentioned?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the clean energy standard, it means different things to different people, and it kind of means whatever it means to you, right? And so the definitions, as you point out, are really important, right? When it's being talked about right now in Congress, when they're talking about a clean energy standard, what they're talking about is counting carbon emissions and this idea of that's really what we need to do. I think we need to have a more specific approach than that to our climate and energy system than just counting these emissions. Now, if you had a clean energy system or clean energy standard that restricted and said, well, we're not going to have gas, we're not going to have CCS, we're not going to have these things, that would arguably be better. Right. And the thing too with the clean energy standards, it also fits really nicely and neatly into an offset program, which is very concerning. That you're setting up this thing and saying we're going to count carbon atoms, and we're going to basically use these agricultural and forest offsets to meet our energy, our climate goals. And that's very concerning for a litany of reasons. So I think that if you were to have a clean energy standard that was very specific and didn't allow for offsets, then I would ask, well, why aren't we just doing a renewable standard instead?
I see. Okay. Thank you.
And so our definition would address that. And we're working with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Well, I was until I talked to Jim, because I was like, yay, a whole bunch of people pushing for a clean energy standard. This is the right direction. And they have the whole framework and a group of people going after each senator, et cetera. And then I'm asking them for clarity about what that clean energy standard is, and I'm not getting an answer. So it seems to me like there's a little bit of a dodge there. Jim, any thoughts there?
I think that, one of the things that's really interesting is the clean energy standard proposed by the Energy Commerce Committee, starts off with a general, here's the benchmark standard, and then it kind of ratchets up over time to be better. And in terms of the overall emissions that it's looking at, but it initially starts off as coal is the baseline. If it's cleaner than coal, then we're all good, right? So you can technically, by some people's analysis, take biomass, shovel it into a coal plant, and that would technically be better by some people's logic, right? And it would allow fracked gas for at least the next decade and potentially probably longer. And so I think that we should be very, very cautious of the push through and the general framework that is established by the Clean Future Act and that clean energy standard. There are parts of the Clean Future Act that I like, but largely it's built on a really bad foundation of this kind of idea that fixing our climate problem is just a matter of counting carbon atoms and ignoring all of the other externalities that exist within our climate and energy system.
Thank you. Jeff, are you still here with us? Jeff Hammond? did you want to ask anything about hydrogen? I don't see you there now.
Jeff left.
Oh, I saw you.
Signed off,
Then
yeah.
you would like to fill up.
Get connected with Jim Walsh to
Okay.
talk about that very thing.
All right, great. Well, maybe we'll connect you. Jim, I was speaking with Jeff and he was saying that hydrogen is just splitting the water atom, H2O. And you're saying it's come from fracking. Can you explain that?
Sure. So green hydrogen is where you would take renewable energy, solar and wind, and use that to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. There are a number of different ways to create hydrogen. The predominant way right now, 95% of the hydrogen in the United States that's produced comes from steam reforming methane. And that's where they literally take fracked gas, put it under pressure into steam, and then will essentially break off, because it's CH4, right? So they're breaking off the hydrogen and the carbon atoms from separating them from each other. And then that carbon forms with oxygen to create CO2, and then the hydrogen is left over. And then what they're actually proposing to do now is to have blue hydrogen, where they would capture that CO2 and sequester it as like this new type of clean energy. But the reality is that the blue hydrogen footprint is actually larger from a climate perspective than coal is. And so we're actually, because it's very energy intensive to do this, right? You got to create this heat and things like that. So it's really that if you look at who's pushing hydrogen, it's the oil and gas industry. That's who's the major backer of hydrogen right now, but they're putting it out there as like, oh, this green hydrogen. But the reality is they already have the market cornered and ready to go on this fracked gas hydrogen that they're already creating. And so it'll be very difficult for the green hydrogen to come forward. If we're going to do things on hydrogen, we should restrict the types of hydrogen production so that we're not creating it from these dirty energy sources. And then we also have to ask questions about the scale of green hydrogen. So when we're building out green hydrogen, we're actually looking at, there might be uses for green hydrogen, right? I'm not like anti-hydrogen. There could be practical uses for hydrogen. Some people think it would be very good for storage of energy in dealing with some of the intermittency issues that we have with clean energy, and may actually create some efficiencies in our system for that. But we need to think about the scale of it, right? A hydrogen economy from green hydrogen would require a tremendous build out of solar and wind energy. At the same time, we're trying to electrify certain parts of our economy, right? So those two things are competing with each other and making it more complicated to actually achieve the green build out that we would need to have. And so I think we just need to be very careful about this. There needs to be far more research done into the scale of hydrogen that we're developing. And you know, the good news is that the questions around hydrogen aren't things we have to decide right now and today. We have the technological capacity to actually build out an energy system that's based on the clean renewable energy that you guys are talking about. And we should do that. We don't need these technological fixes. There might be things like green hydrogen that might play a role in helping make that more affordable. It might make it more, might improve it. But the idea that we're going to have a hydrogen economy is very concerning. And the push right now around green hydrogen is really being pushed mostly as an effort to expand and extend the gas industry, right? Like right now in New York, where I know many people on this call are, National Grid is proposing to have a hydrogen gas plant where they're going to use green hydrogen and add it into their gas mix. But it's being used to justify the continuation of a gas plant and saying this is low carbon gas now. And so we need to be very careful of the role that we play with green hydrogen in our economy and as we move forward. There are places where it could be useful in the transition, but not at the scale of a hydrogen economy. And also it's not going to compete with the fossil gas hydrogen that we're seeing right now.
And how about with respect to automobiles?
What
They're
do you
talking
mean?
about hydrogen cars. How is that? What's the deal there?
Yeah, I think that, you know, we should be really focused mostly on electrification. The idea of building out two separate infrastructures is a big undertaking, right? So if we're building an electric vehicle infrastructure, and then a hydrogen vehicle infrastructure, those are two big infrastructure projects that become very costly that are essentially then competing with each other, right? And so I think that when I think about transportation, I think about, like, we need to think more holistically about transportation than just cars is the other part of this, right? We need to, as I said before, we need to really focus on the aspects of public transit, more walkable communities, more bikeable communities, building, restructuring our communities to be more more susceptible to these, more, I guess, walking, biking, things like that. Making sure that, I think that, we've seen under coronavirus now that working from home can actually work for a lot of people. And so we don't need to have as many people commuting, right? And so I think these are all things that when we think about that transportation, we need to take into consideration, but not just be focused on the individual vehicles. Now that's something that needs to be addressed, and electrification seems to be the best way to do that for individual transportation.
All right, well, Jim, we can tell you haven't given any of this much thought, but we're very grateful for the shallow level of information you've given. I made a mistake and asked you a question about hydrogen, and halfway through my eyes rolled back in my head, and I was like, I lost it. I wanted to get this, but I got the gist. You're amazing. We're very grateful always that we're part of the family together. I can see Regina clapping for you, everybody. Applause to Jim, holding down the fort on the left side of our consciousness, so to speak. Thank you for that. Just real quickly before we go, Jonathan Brady, would you like to say just a quick mention about where we stand with our engaging the marketing industry to help us on this effort?
Yeah, sure. Because I see we're right at time. I did have a follow-up question for Jim about Thrive, but maybe I'll email him. So we're working with the American Association of Advertising Agencies to put together a climate congress that will bring together the major and some of the smaller agencies to figure out how the advertising industry can put its shoulder to the wheel here. Advertising, for better or for worse, as you know, all of you, is in the persuasion business, right? So that's about changing beliefs and changing behaviors, and there's all kinds of magical tools that the industry uses to do those things. And Todd, I think it's great that we're getting some crystallization around electricity, food, and cars, because as we've talked about, the sharper you can get your pencil on what you're trying to get people to believe and to do, the better and more effective advertising you can create. So number one, we're trying to get the industry to understand how it can help. But I know, Todd, you're also very excited about a specific campaign that would give oxygen to some of the efforts that we're all doing here, so that it wouldn't be just policy nerds and people who think about this every day, but how do we communicate this to people throughout the country and around the world. We have a couple big agencies now who are behind this, who are behind convening this event, and so we're pretty optimistic now that it's going to happen. Because for a while it's just a lonely band of us advertising people trying to make it happen, but now we've got some agency support and, like I said, a couple big ones. So stay tuned.
Yahoo! I'm so excited. Jim, I don't remember, we've been talking about the marketing industry. I was to your team since 2018. And so this is now coming to fruition. So I couldn't be more excited about that. Christine, would you like to put up the results of our earlier poll? As a lawyer, you never really ask questions you don't know the answers to, but here they are. Clean energy, of course. So 91% on the focus, that's wonderful. 66% support of the definition, maybe 29. So we're gonna have some conversation about that, but it's still pretty strong. Very little no. Regenerative agriculture, 71%, it's coming in strong. 20% maybe, so there's some folks that we need to spend some time on that definition. The deadline, 91%. Sense of urgency is warranted, 94%, good, because I keep saying, am I crazy here? No, I know I'm not, but I feel crazy. And then 77% said they would ask their representative or their senator about the Earth Bill, and 20% said maybe. So That's great. We only have a few no's, and at some point I'd love to hear from the no's. Feel free to email me if you're a no, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But that's very exciting. I think it shows that we're on the right track. All right, everybody, with that, we'll conclude our formal meeting, and we can stop the recording. Andrew, thank you for everything. Andrew's been taking care of the YouTube channel. Everyone go there, spread the videos. Everything's going exceptionally well. Thank you to the faith groups that are organizing, like Mad, Lavona, and Nancy, and Terry. And I think that's it for today. And we'll hang on the line just a little while for anyone who has any questions that they want to talk to me directly about. I assume, Jim, you have to go, but Jonathan, if you want to ask Jim your question while he's still here, I think that's fine if he feels like it. But Jim, don't feel, you have to stay too long. And everybody, thank you all. Please get look at the Earth Bill, send it around, share it with that email. Let me know how you like that email. I spent a lot of time writing that email, about a week, it seems like, that message that went out. And I really enjoyed the research into the farming stuff and everything. It's actually been sort of rewarding. All right, so with that, thank you, everybody. And Jonathan, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.